Behind every piece of art is an idea. Behind every piece of public art is an idea. This monumental sculpture has an idea behind it. It's about human productivity. It's about human imagination. It's about human energy. That's why water is spewing from its mouth. Behind every piece of art is an idea. Behind this art are two ideas: saving an artifact and being humane. This was once a watering trough for oxen and horses and mules. Public art saving another historic artifact, the bedstone and grinding stone of a nearby grist mill. Behind every piece of art is an idea. This is a patriotic idea, showing a local hero, Captain Jack, who took anti-British documents to the Continental Congress in May 1775. Fireworks, that's public art, and the idea behind it on the 4th of July is celebration. Public art can express the full range of human emotion. This is the grave of a 3-year-old child. See the grief on the angel's face? Next to the cross, the most commonly used symbol in Christian burials is the shrouded urn. The shroud symbolizes the death of the body, the urn, the immortality of the soul. Behind every piece of art is an idea. In September 1880, John King, a circus worker, was killed by an elephant in Charlotte. His grave marker pictures the elephant. What makes art public art? What makes art public art? Is it where it's located? Is it how it looks? Is it its material? What makes art public art? Well, let me advance a proposition that in order for art to be public art, it must engage the public, not only aesthetically, not only intellectually, but emotionally. Case in point, this is the Uptown Urban Ministry in Charlotte, North Carolina. Look at this art. This is outsider art. These people have no training. They don't understand art theory. They're just drawing. But I would contend that this is public art. I have no idea who this woman is. I don't know her name. But she does engage this art emotionally. Tell me why you like that horse.
Because I like to ride him.
She likes to ride him. She likes to ride him. Case in point, this is Hugh McManaway. Hugh McManaway became somewhat of a legend in Charlotte. He would stand near the intersection of Queens and Providence Road and time the traffic signals. At just the right moment, he would turn around and point at the light. He was a man of interesting capacities and interesting incapacities. Smart, but severely learning disabled. He grew up in this house nearby, where at birthday parties he would entertain the children by playing a musical saw. Hugh McManaway frequented a local restaurant where he'd go up to the tables and say,
I don't curse, but I speak in verse.
"What'd you say?"
I don't curse, but I speak in verse.
Or,
You're not liable if you read the Bible.
what's that again?
You're not liable if you read the Bible.
Or,
I tell cars when to go and stop, but I'm not really a traffic cop.
some people like the Hugh McManaway statue. Some people don't. Some people even think that it's disrespectful of his condition. But public art is often controversial. But one thing is clear. If you use the criterion of people interacting with it, you have to admit that the Hugh McManaway statue is effective public art. Sometimes he becomes a woman with a string of pearls. Sometimes he's a Buddhist monk. Sometimes he goes to a Mexican fiesta. From friends and neighbors. Among them, Hugh McCall.
Rain or shine, he was out there directing traffic. And there's more traffic and Hugh would have more to do, but he was quite good.
The ideas behind this statue? Affection and nostalgia. In Hickory, North Carolina, you can sit on public art. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting next to Marilyn Monroe. The Hickory Public Art Commission has placed benches all across town to delight the eye and raise the spirit. In Lincolnton, North Carolina, it's not benches, it's pottery. Stretching east from the courthouse square are large face pots. The idea is to celebrate a regional art form. The program is called Pots on Parade.
The idea behind the Pots on Parade program was to, through a public arts program, which included having a local potter turn the pieces and having other potters put apply the facial features onto the piece. And not all of them have what we consider facial features. They have snakes, they have, one of them has a sphinx on it. There are lots of different features on them. But the idea is to highlight and spotlight the Catawba Valley pottery tradition that's been around in Lincoln and Catawba counties for over 200 years.
Public art becomes especially controversial when it evokes conflicting memories, like memories of the Confederacy.
And the Confederate battle flag was not a symbol of hate.
And there was a lot of Scottish influence in the South, as I understand. And when they went to a design, they liked the St. Andrew's cross off of the Scottish battle flag, or off the Scottish national flag, excuse me. So they used that as the design, and then they put the stars in there. They put, I believe has 13 stars on it.
It's a flag honoring the people that gave their lives, and there were thousands and thousands of people that gave their life for that cause.
I think the question is context. I mean, you can go to any number of you can go to NASCAR races and folks have that flag up. And what's the point that they're trying to say? Hey, we're good old Southern folks. But in being good old Southern folks, what's the message they send with that flag? Is it a message of inclusiveness? Is it a message of we don't like black folk? Is it a message of we're maintaining a tradition? You see a lot of times where people have those tags on the front of their car with a little rebel and a Confederate flag. This is like, hell no, we'll never forget. And I don't think in that regard, that's where some of that crosses the line.
But they all died under the Confederate battle flag, and that's why it is so revered to the soldier. And they would, before they would give that flag up, they would tear it to pieces, and different ones brought pieces of stars. There's a star in the Concord Museum that was brought back from one of the battle flags that they didn't want to surrender.
When we lose parents, when we lose loved ones, when we perhaps find somebody that meant something to us, we want to remember that person. And maybe in that regard, that was the best method of remembrance.
Well, of course, always the very first thing that comes up is slavery. Of course, if you've studied history, Civil War history at all, you know that the war was never about slavery.
That argument is as old as the UDC itself, or as old as the Confederacy. But I don't buy it. That's been their argument from day one, that this is about states' rights. They're kidding themselves if they don't think this had to do anything with slavery. It absolutely had something to do with slavery. The end of that, they never complete the sentence. This was about states' rights. The end of that sentence is to keep and maintain slaves.
Slavery was on its way out to begin with. The industrial age would certainly replace it. It was too expensive to house and take care of the slaves.
You can, look back on it and say that it would have ended anyway, but there was no movement in that direction at all. If anything, the hope was to extend slavery.
Do you think it was a just cause?
Well, you're asking my opinion, and my opinion is yes.
Why do you believe it was a just
Well,
cause?
I think that states should be governed by their own state. And I think that's originally what our forefathers designed the Constitution for.
The Civil War was fought by men in the South who believed that they were fighting for Southern rights.
It's an expression. For me, in my age or my time, I see that as an expression, someone's expression of their past, and anything that has to do with history or our past, you don't want to forget it, but you don't want to make it to where other people can't express how they feel or what they're feeling about it.
I think that the Confederate battle flag is pretty much dealt with within the eye of the beholder. You will hear the arguments all the time. It is a symbol of heritage and not hate. But in many instances, you find there are people that use it, like the Klan used it, as a means of intimidation.
The battle flag is only one of many. But that is the one that's been chosen by a variety of groups, not just Confederate organizations, white separatist organizations, racist organizations, segregationists use it. Currently there are groups of people who would like to secede from the United States that use it. So it's been used in a way that's been very, very negative and defiant and that sort of thing.
The Southerner is a small portion of the United States that wouldn't dare attack the U.S. flag, but they can attack the Confederate flag.
Public art tells a variety of Civil War stories. This tablet in Monroe, North Carolina, honors free African Americans who served the Confederacy.
I don't think I had knowledge that at one point there were free people of color. That I always thought everyone came in as a colored person was a slave.
This is the Federal Cemetery in Salisbury, North Carolina, located at the site of a huge Confederate prison camp. Thousands of Union soldiers died there, and 2 states have erected memorials to their service and sacrifice: Pennsylvania and Maine. These men fought so that our country could continue to live. Controversy and art go hand in hand. Controversy and public art go hand in hand. Case in point. Some believe that this sculpture on the light rail line in Charlotte looks like a series of potato chips. Others see this sculpture and say it reminds them of onion rings. In 1987, the Charlotte City Council rejected this artwork by sculptor Joel Shapiro when 2 radio personalities said it looked like Gumby. Such decisions and statements about artwork looking like potato chips or onion rings or Gumby reveal that many remain uncomfortable with a transformation in art that occurred between the mid-1800s and mid-1900s. This portrait of a wealthy South Carolinian was painted about 1840. The artist, William Harrison Scarborough, attempts to depict how the man actually looked, including his double chin. Now look at these 2 portraits. John Paul Kosis painted them in the 1970s. The first is of a wealthy Philadelphia businessman. Now the colors are very, very dramatic, but nobody looks like this. The second is of a ballerina. Look at her eyes. Again, no woman that I know of looks anything like this. Kosis believes that the real essence of a human being is not the surface. It's not what the eye sees. It's the inner workings of the psyche. Now, what's going on here? I went to the Beckler Museum of Modern Art in Charlotte and asked its president, John Boyer, to explain.
I think it's safe to say that there was a remarkable confluence of phenomena that created an environment in which a brave new view of the world through an artist's eyes was made possible. Freudian psychology and the reinterpretation of the way the mind works had a direct influence on many modernists. There has been a lot of very good work studying the impact of Einstein's theories of relativity on early modernists. The notion of changing notions of how time and distance work. The terror, and especially the mechanized terror of World War I, and the loss of so many young men, and women too, but created a state of anxiety that was rather overwhelming for many modernists. In the middle of the 19th century, one of the first elements was the rivalry posed by photography. If the creation of art in the beginning was to somehow achieve a verisimilitude, that is to say, that on a two-dimensional plane you could create a three-dimensional world, photography, of course, would beat anybody. I think it's safe to say that the Museum of Modern Art in New York has been likely the most powerful influence in the rise of modernism, not only in this country, but frankly as a catalyst, as a spur for the institutional embrace of modernism in Europe. The true hallmark of what constitutes the rise of modernism in the beginning of the 20th century is the vocabulary of abstraction. That is to say, that you can have a vital, meaningful work of art that is entirely non-representational. There is no notion at all of verisimilitude, but instead that the object itself becomes its own reality and can then be freighted with all kinds of other deeper meaning, spiritual, philosophical, analytical, historical, sometimes even political. Even though there may not be a clear and apparent subject, it does not mean that the work may not be freighted with all kinds of content and meaning. As to the Firebird being the right kind of object or image for Charlotte, I would offer this much. Charlotte, in so many ways, is not only is it a new South City, it's a new city, period. It's constantly inventing itself and reinventing itself. It welcomes so many new people from not only across the country, but from around the world. It is becoming rapidly this truly cosmopolitan community of people who are attracted to a city known for its energy and its optimism, its ability to do a deal, the variety of perspectives that are celebrated after a long and hard-fought battle to make sure that it became that kind of city. And so if that's the case, if Charlotte is ambitiously modern and forward-looking and filled with energy and optimism, I think the Firebird is the perfect image for a town like this. And also for a town that welcomes so many people each year as new residents from around the world. I would argue the welcoming arms of that spectacular bird work perfectly for Charlotte now in the 21st century.
It's exploratory art. It makes me think or react to the art, the picture or the sculpture at hand. It's draws you in.
Every piece of art has an idea behind it. Every piece of public art has an idea behind it. That's why colleges and universities are especially prone to display abstract art, because they are in the business of stimulating imagination, questioning, pondering, and thinking. With realistic art, what you see is what you get. A football player at a football stadium, a soccer player at a soccer stadium. There's no pondering, there's no questioning. But abstract art, because it is not, if you will, fully packaged, can get you into a lot of trouble. This sculpture on the University of North Carolina at Charlotte campus is a case in point. The story begins in February 1975. The initial home of the sculpture was on the front lawn of the stately Mint Museum of Art in Charlotte. The staff, supported by money from members, had matched a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. There was great anticipation when the sculpture was assembled. The public's response was immediate and vociferous.
Anyone who says with a straight face that that pile of garbage in front of the Mint Museum is rather nice is displaying unbelievable gall and arrogance, as well as bad taste. Sylvia Lee Moore. I and hundreds of other people are wondering when that atrocity is going to be moved from the front lawn of the Mint Museum. Emma Smith.
I agree with Emma Smith 1,000%, but calling that pile of junk in front of the Mint Museum an atrocity is flattery. It is so much worse than an atrocity that there is no word bad enough to describe it. Mr. and Mrs. Lee Rand.
The alleged sculpture defacing the lovely grounds of the Mint Museum is an offense and an outrage. Mrs. L. Folger.
The Mint Museum bowed to public pressure and removed the sculpture.
If art is supposed to matter in our lives, it is worthy of vigorous debate by informed voices. You don't want it to be shanghaied by people who really aren't as informed or who come to this argument for reasons other than what's in the best interest of the community at large. And you also want it to be driven by people who are willing to embrace some measure of risk because they recognize that the forward motion of any community, whether it's in the world of finance or in government or in art, whatever it ends up being, if you really expect to grow, you need an appetite for risk. But if there's an unwillingness to push the envelope, do not be surprised if your city first stays the same and eventually withers. And I think one of the great things about public art is a constant reminder of those moments when a community decided to do its best, to take a risk, to stretch a little, because it wasn't only about that moment, they were preparing the city for the years to come.